I'd been to seminary. I wasn't really sure I wanted to be a pastor. I had some hesitation, a lot of reasons for that. And then I went out and tried something else for 8 years, and God just kept bringing me back every time. And so that's what I did. Even when I was running retail as an executive, I had a pastor who had me as a bivocational or unpaid associate pastor and his staff helping with the youth group. And he wouldn't let me get away from my calling. And he just kept giving me opportunities to serve and be a minister, be a pastor. And so it just kind of, there was one day probably in early 1990, I guess, where I just knew that I was called to go to ministry and I had to head back that way. But I was still raising kids and had a family to provide for and a mortgage payment to make. And so that transition took a couple years. But all through my life, I could tell you all the way back into my junior year, around Thanksgiving time, I knew that even though I loved history and I wanted to go to college to be a history major, that I was probably going to wind up in ministry. So I had that experience. And then in college, I was still debating as I was getting ready to go to grad school. So I'd go for a PhD in American history, which would be a love from me, or would I go to seminary? And what I did was I sent both applications to both grad schools, several grad schools at the same time, mailed them all on the same day. And I basically wanted to see where God wanted me to go. And so my prayer to God was, whichever direction you want me to go, you will send that school's acceptance letter back to me first. And so one day I went to my mailbox at campus my senior year, and there was the letter from Denver Seminary saying I had been accepted to enter the class in the fall of 1980 to begin a Master of Divinity program. You have to do some self-reflection and learn to listen to yourself and say, okay, what am I most gifted at? What do I do very well naturally? Each of us wired in such a way that we have a skill set that's our best comfort zone for working and maximizing our talent and ability. I get in front of a crowd, I'm energized, I'm charged, I like to preach, I like to talk, I like to teach the Bible. So for me, it was just finding the right niche of how I could use all those gifts and talents. And since I like preaching, it's pretty obvious that being a pastor and standing before congregation every week and saying, "Thus saith the Lord," is something I'm comfortable doing. It's an awesome responsibility, but it's also a great privilege. I love being a pastor. I like working with people. Love it. I'd like to see people's lives changed.